create equitable improvements in the environment, health, and local economies and in communities all across the United States in all shapes and sizes. From projects like Local Foods, Local Places, which we're excited to announce that we'll be starting new technical assistance to 5 communities, including Turner Station at the foot of what was the Key Bridge, the one that tragically fell in Baltimore, to the Building Blocks for Sustainable Communities program, which is also has also recently announced our work to work with 10 brownfields communities on planning for equitable development and sustainable strategies for small cities and rural communities. Our work with communities is really about letting communities tell us what we need to know to make a difference for them, for the folks on the ground. We're helping communities achieve goals for equitable development, disaster resilience, and environment. I am a bit envious. Our participation in SGN is really important to our own work, enabling us to hear from folks on the ground or closer to the folks working on the ground and improve on how we serve communities. And when I first spoke to this group, it was at the convening that was with the realtors at the realtors building, a little bit nicer, I will say, than the federal building. But in any case, and that was really a great opportunity to talk about that focus, which is obviously a real priority for this administrator and this administration. And I know for your goals this afternoon, your goals are, now that we have a whole bunch of federal resources that frankly were not available at the first meeting, to hear about some of the federal programs that are working to bring some of these new resources and funds and opportunities for environmental justice, for climate resilience, and more to the local level. And then second, to connect with others across this network so you can collaborate more effectively, bringing your own much needed experience and expertise to the conversation. And in the roundtable, you'll be hearing from other speakers who will be explaining some of the different federal assistance and funding opportunities for local communities, like the technical assistance programs provided by HUD and DOT, agency Thriving Communities Network, and of course, our recently announced Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, one of many major announcements that we've done in the last month or so. As you see from those announcements, this is such a unique and transformational time as we capitalize on this huge opportunity through the President's Investing in America agenda to make meaningful improvements for strong infrastructure and more sustainable investments and our energy and our infrastructure into the coming century. And we have many representatives joining us here and online who are implementing this work, including offering technical assistance to communities all over the country. So thank you all for helping to make this transition happen on the ground. It's also a great opportunity to learn about the relationships between federal funding programs and climate change adaptation, particularly how programs can support equitable development goals and smart growth principles. We are at a key moment for many of these programs. A lot of the work has been done, but there's still funding to be dispersed. For example, you might have been following our climate pollution reduction grants program, where the first phase was a set of planning grants where states who had done climate planning for years with my team before and others, and states that were really new to the dance, got support from EPA to enter into agreements and work with their local communities and partners to develop their own plans. And now we're in the second phase of that, which is providing over $4.6 billion in grants ultimately to local governments, tribes, and territories to develop and actually implement the plans for reducing greenhouse gas emissions and other harmful air pollution, while often getting many, many co-benefits from the investments that they're making for those purposes that also align with what we're trying to do for smart growth and green infrastructure investment for all kinds of reasons, for urban heat, island impacts, and more. Last month, we announced that 45 states plus DC and Puerto Rico, as well as dozens of MSAs, have developed climate action plans through investments under the CPRG program. Over 96% of the US population is covered by one of these plans. So red states and blue states and others have stepped up to be part of this. And as we move forward, we want to ensure that we're being smart about how we are engaging these partners by adapting and adopting our smart growth principles to this work and ensuring that safe and sustainable and wise investments are being made to support states and tribes and local governments and CBOs. So we hope that you'll use this opportunity to engage with us, to probe on these issues, to ask questions and give us important feedback based on your own experience and with the places that you have worked. You all form such an important link between our work with community leaders, although of course we have our own relationships with our local government advisory committee or LGAC, and really try to take as many meetings with outside jurisdictions and groups as we can now that things are opening up a bit. We're getting out in the world a little bit more and having people come to us. But we obviously really value this team's efforts and work on the ground and those relationships and what you bring to the table to inform what we're doing moving forward. In the second part of the meeting, you'll have the opportunity to connect with other participants and find new ways to work together to achieve shared goals. This is going to be a chance to learn more about each other and identify some common themes and issues that you'd like to collaborate on together, and maybe, weave other people's work into your own. And this is precisely the kind of engagement work that I did in my previous life with communities and others who serve them. So I am a bit envious of those who can really stay and unpack all that and find those opportunities to collaborate, because I really miss that work. But at the moment, because I am having to make sure that we get some of these rules out the door, I will just have to wait to hear the report out of those conversations that you all will have this afternoon. But I really appreciate your being here. Thank you for giving me some time just to tell you a little bit more about our Office of Policy. And I really hope you guys have a great afternoon, and really look forward to hearing what you all decide and how this network is going to continue to grow and evolve in the coming years. So thanks so much and enjoy. And I'll give up my seat to somebody who needs it.
Thank you. Shall I just jump in? Okay. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to EPA. On behalf of OCR, also, as Alina mentioned, thanks for coming out here in person and online. So happy to see all these faces here. And it was definitely worth all the scrambling of the room change, I think. But the team did a great job with kind of getting everybody ready for that. My name's Alexis Rourke-Reyes. If I haven't met you before, usually I attend these meetings as the program manager of the Superfund Redevelopment Program, but I'm wearing a different hat today. And it's a fun one so far. So I just started a detail this week with the Office of Community Revitalization as the acting division director for the Community Assistance and Research Division. I actually was a member of that team for 4 years before spending a couple of years over at Superfund. So really happy to be back, really happy to be with this network. These are our people, and we're just so happy to have you here. So I'm happy I get to honor moderating this discussion with our esteemed guest and from EPA, from DOT, from HUD. And we're going to tell you about some of their federally supported opportunities. There's so much going on right now. I'm sure you all know better than I do in this, the niches that you work in. But with all of that and with the lens that you all tend to bring to it in this network, how do you make sure that the communities that are getting these funding opportunities, how do we engage with them in terms of capacity building, funding opportunities? How do we, I think there's been a lot of effort spent all around in terms of helping people kind of prepare to be ready to receive these grants. And that's one piece of the puzzle. And then now, as you all are going forward as practitioners, how can you all hear direct from the sources what these programs are all about and be thinking in the ways that you all do your work about how, what that really looks like on the day-to-day in terms of working with communities that get access to these programs. So we have 3 speakers here today. I will introduce them, and we have them set to talk about a couple of questions in advance, and then we will, let them do their presentations on each of their respective programs, and then we'll talk a couple more questions that we have from our group here, and then we'd love to hear from you all. So I will read through some of the bios, and I like to read those because I know people worked hard for every sentence in those bios sometimes, and I don't want to mess it up. So let me do that, but I'm so happy to have you all. Well, I'll make it. So first on my right, I have Pam Blumenthal. So we're from HUD. She's the Director of Priority Projects and Innovation Division in the Office of Policy Development and Research at HUD. For everybody that knows, Department of Housing and Urban Development. So her team works to develop and implement new programs and high-profile projects. She's social science analyst, got to work on special projects like the Interagency Thriving Communities Network, reducing regulatory barriers to affordable housing, and developing HUD's first equity action plan. It's an exciting time. So I know Pam spent time before at the Urban Institute. I won't go through everything. And also at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and has a PhD from George Washington University. I know we have some professors from that school here, with a focus on local land use regulatory regimes and residential development outcomes, and also a JD, so law degree from University of Michigan, and undergraduate from Cornell. So very well triangulated, prepared to tackle these issues with us. On my left, I have Victor Austin, who has more than 25 years of experience as a community planner with the Federal Transit Administration and the Chicago Regional Office. I love that regional experience. I'm still trying to get some myself, where you provide technical assistance and guidance to states, metropolitan planning organizations, and transit agencies on federal funding programs, planning regulations, and the statewide and metropolitan planning processes. He's also worked as a program manager with the state at the Illinois Department of Transportation, and also with one of the transit operators in the St. Louis, Missouri region, and recently joined the Office of the Secretary to join the Build America Bureau as a senior community planner. So thank you for taking the time to be with us. Finally, we have our Pam's former colleague at HUD, but new to the EPA family, Julie Zavala, is Deputy Director of the Office of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund at EPA. But before working on that, she's been experienced manager of federal programs to support equitable and sustainable community development. I know that's near and dear to all of our hearts. And as I mentioned, prior to coming to EPA, she's worked at HUD's Office of Community Planning and Development, the Department of Treasury's Community Development Financial Institutions Fund, and the U.S. Agency for International Development, with a public policy degree from Georgetown, Vicky's stomping ground, and undergraduate from Stanford. So great group here. And thank you. I'm going to turn it over to you guys in a minute. I just want to frame for everybody here some of the things that you all are going to talk about. So primarily, I know, all these agencies have, before I do that, actually, I wanted to acknowledge we don't have anybody on this panel from the EPA Office of Environmental Justice and External Civil Rights. But as people know, that's a big area of EPA activity these days. I do see on the line one of our former alum from the Office of Community Revitalization, who's now over in that shop, Darlene Bird. So many folks there are engaged at a retreat today, so they are sending their best. And if you have particular questions about that, I'm sure we can get people linked up with those folks afterwards. So, but back to the folks that we have here. So just if you guys could share with us, what are kind of the overall goals for your program, current status, especially if there are any things that people should be passing on to their networks to apply for or get technical assistance with. And then I think just for the interest of this group, how do you see the connections of those programs with smart growth principles? And in particular, I would say that these are smart growth principles of equitable development and also helping communities address climate change. And so, if there are any things that can stick out in those areas. And I guess I'll maybe, Victor, would you like to go? He seems ready to go. All right. Well,
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, no. Good afternoon. I'm really happy to be here to talk about the Thriving Communities program. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to provide a high-level overview of the Thriving Communities program, and I'll speak to the overall goals of the program, the status of the program, and then I'll let you know about a new Reconnecting Communities Pilot Grant program that we recently initiated. And I'm going to try to do all that in less than 5 minutes, because I think it's really important that we have discussion and that we interact and that we have time to do that. So I'm going to try to be brief and not talk too fast. So the Thriving Communities program, it was established with the FY 2022 Appropriations Act. And the purpose of the program is to enable DOT to provide technical assistance, planning, and capacity building support that enables all communities essentially to deliver good projects by providing them the tools needed to assess the funding and programs and the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act. The program funds a diverse set of capacity builders that provides work directly with communities to help build upon their local expertise and to help them in terms of advancing infrastructure projects that are critical to social, environment, economic, and mobility needs. So in our program, we have selected 4 capacity builders that's providing technical assistance to 64 communities throughout the United States. We have 42 states that are represented, 6 tribal nations, and also Puerto Rico. So that's a little bit of context about the program. It's a $25 million program, and it's the period of performance is just 2 years. So the goals of the program, and I'm just going to kind of read this out because I don't have it memorized, is to plan and develop a pipeline of community-driven transportation and community revitalization activities. And I think the key word in that particular goal is community-driven. And that's really important because in our program, we think it's important that the community is involved in the decision-making process, and you don't have policy directors making decisions for communities without their input. To increase mobility and reduce pollution from transportation sources, and as well as to expand affordable transportation options, to facilitate efficient land use, preserve or expand jobs, and to improve housing conditions. And in regards to improving housing conditions, I'm really happy to say that DOT, OST, our office has an excellent relationship with Pam's office and her group. We have regular meetings. We talk about which each other programs are doing. And we try to come up with strategies and ways on how can we leverage each other resources. So I'm really proud of that relationship we have with HUD. Also, another goal is to enhance connections to healthcare, education, food security, and improve health outcomes, as well as to offer support to disadvantaged and under-resourced communities. In terms of how our program aligns with the smart growth principles, our program does align, well, first with DOT priorities in terms of supporting the administration's Justice 40 policy and the DOT equity plan. And also our program ensures implementation of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, a law rather, as well as the Inflation Reduction Act. And it supports a interagency striving community.
Well, I'll make it.
A whole of government approach to place-based planning. And as I mentioned earlier, Pam's office, HUD, is part of that network, as well as EPA, GSA. We're getting more and more agencies that are coming on. It seems like I think we have about 10 that are part of our Striving Communities network. We're also trying to grow community capacity and take transformative projects from concept through delivery. Okay, one more point I want to make, or 2 more points actually, is when this program was initiated, we're trying to think of what are the outcomes we want to see from this program. This is a 2-year program. We have capacity builders that are going into the community and providing technical assistance. So some of the things that we're anticipating in terms of the impact is advancing project readiness, accelerating and advancing projects into successful grant applications, leveraging private, public, and philanthropic investment, influencing the statewide transportation improvement program in terms of getting project programmed into these documents, and identifying a national set of community-driven transformative projects. The last thing I would talk about is the Reconnecting Community Institute. Through this institute, we have the Reconnecting Communities pilot program, which is designed to provide technical assistance to help those communities that have been bifurcated from major infrastructure, highway, or transportation projects. Thank you. Hope that wasn't too loud.
Wonderful, thank you. I'll pass it over to Pam or Julie.
Go ahead. So the reason I follow Victor is because HUD's program of Thriving Communities Technical Assistance, we named them the same so we could confuse everyone, was designed in partnership. Right. So in the money that DOT was given, that bill gave instructions to HUD to take $5 million of our technical assistance money to coordinate with DOT to make sure that housing is being considered as part of these infrastructure investments. And so that is when we started this relationship of meeting and designing our programs so that we were thinking about what's happening at the community level. So HUD's Thriving Community Technical Assistance, like I said, is small. It's $5 million, and it's funding 2 teams of TA providers who are working with local governments. So one of the differences is DOT has cohorts. So they opened it up to letters of interest, and they brought together these 64 communities in these 4 different cohorts and are working with them as a team. HUD's program is smaller, wanted to get it up and running. Ours is a rolling basis, so it is still open to communities. And we have a simple kind of request form to see if it's a good fit. We'll talk about that more later. So the goal of this program is to provide technical assistance to local governments to help them address housing needs as they are designing and deploying all of this infrastructure investment. So one of our main focus is transportation. So one of our requirements is that they have received competitive US DOT funds. But the thought is that at the community level, you're getting money for, environmental, you're getting money for this human. There wasn't a lot of housing money being brought at the local level. And yet every time you do something in the transportation system, you're affecting communities where they live. And so we are really there to make sure that someone says, as you're doing this, how are you thinking about meeting your housing strategies? And so it's a little program, but we think it serves a really important. So like I said, we have requirements. You have to have received US DOT competitive funds. There's a list of programs that are more related to have some land use component in them. So it might be areas for poverty, raise grants, reconnecting communities. It's a long list. We're flexible as how we interpret that. The project must benefit disadvantaged communities and support equitable development. So the disadvantaged communities is another thing we did with DOT. We both have that requirement. We use DOT's definition, which is based on EJ 40. And when you tell me that this is going to be happening in the transportation, and if it's over here and the disadvantaged community is over here, and this is where your housing is, it doesn't meet our needs. We want to make sure that the communities that being negatively impacted has a voice and has an opportunity to do that. And we are giving priority to smaller jurisdictions with populations no greater than 250,000. Not that small, but we think that larger ones have more capacity, and we want to be in that spot. Thriving Communities Technical Assistance is designed to address 4 focus areas. These are the only areas we are working on. This is how we put in our NOFA for our TA providers, so we are limited to this. These are very much aligned with smart growth principles. This is really part of the administration's how do we help housing supply? And so again, I'm going to read so I get it right. So one is identifying and using underutilized land on or near transportation projects to create location efficient housing. Another focus area is preserving affordable housing and protecting residents and businesses from displacement as new infrastructure is being deployed. Third is identifying and implementing regulatory and procedural reforms to reduce unnecessary barriers to location efficient housing. And the fourth is improving coordination in ways to support a holistic and regional approach to housing and transportation. So when we put in that coordination piece, thinking, helping the city work with the transportation office, helping the planning people talk to the transportation people, talk to the public works people. But we also thought the community of partners are a really important part of that too. What we have found is every single request we've gotten, at the core of it, they need help with community engagement. They need a way to make sure that they are both hearing the community, being responsive to the community, and figuring out a way to tell the story. So when you have new transit and you want to work with them to change the regulatory environment, right? You're going to get a lot of pushback from your elected officials until they understand what the story is. And so that has been part of every engagement that we have underway. There has been a request for including that community engagement. And we're fortunate that our teams have brought in, we have Equitable Cities, we have Partnership for Sustainable Equity to really, with that expertise to do it. Right now, we have 6 cities that we are doing deep direct TA with. Like I said, we are open. It's a rolling basis. We anticipate we'll be able to serve 12 to 20 cities with this kind of direct TA. But what we've done is learning from what our current recipients are and working closely with DOT's capacity builders in their 4 cohorts, learning what the housing pressures are for those communities. We have been working with our TA providers to start thinking about kind of what are the tools and dissemination strategies. And with that, there'll be group learning. So we're now putting into place development. We're going to have tools on displacement, community engagement, zoning reform. And it's not going to be a webinar. It's going to be a set of tools that are connected with an opportunity to join some cohort learning or something like that. We're also trying to put in some light touch because we're finding there's some things that people need. They're overwhelmed with all the grants that are coming in, and they might just need help with an RFP to make sure that the housing study they're going to ask for addresses the needs they really should be thinking about. And so we need some smaller things that we can't take the time to put the paperwork in place. We need to do that. So we're transitioning to that as well. So the last thing is, so why this piece of TCTA is focused at thinking, you've got all this going on, how can we help you think about housing? The other thing we're doing at HUD is saying, there's a lot of money out there. So how can we think about ways to braid that money to help support housing? And so we have some examples of people who work on the climate issues that are saying, you know, energy efficiency and electrification. We have an example of how can you get money from EPA's GGRF. I'll let you talk about that and put that in so that you can make it affordable to bring energy efficiency and electrification. There are ways to bring solar to housing that you can make it more affordable because we can find other ways of paying for it without HUD money and without the developer money. So we're really excited that all the money's out there and we're bringing this expertise. So we have our little program, but we also have a lot of great minds that are trying to think of how to use your bigger programs. Happy to talk about that more as we move on.
All right. Thank you. I'll pass it over to Julie. Thanks, Pam.
Hey, hi, everyone. Really glad to be here today representing the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, which was the largest non-tax provision in the Inflation Reduction Act when it passed in 2022, and at $27 billion is one of the largest investments in climate and our communities that we've seen in this country. So the GGRF, Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, is actually a set of 3 programs. The first is the $14 billion National Clean Investment Fund. Just last week, we announced the selection of 3 organizations under that program, and they represent national nonprofit clean financing entities that will finance thousands of clean technology projects across the country and leverage private sector money in the process. We also announced 5 selectees under the $6 billion Clean Community Investment Accelerator program. This program is a complement to that first program in that we're funding hub nonprofits that will then provide technical assistance and financial assistance to a broad network of community lenders across the country, really building their capacity to finance clean technology projects in low-income and disadvantaged communities. So 100% of the funds from the Clean Communities Investment Accelerator, or CCIA, will go into low-income and disadvantaged communities. And I should have said at least 40% of the first program, the National Clean Investment Fund, will also go to low-income and disadvantaged communities, though our selectees have committed to doing much more than that. Our third program is the $7 billion Solar for All program. We have not yet announced the selectees for that program. That will come later in the coming weeks. This program will provide grants to states, municipalities, nonprofits, tribes, and other entities for residential solar and community solar across the country. So as I mentioned, these are competitive programs. We're in the process of announcing selectees. And we're going to be working through the summer to really get those awards nailed down, at which point the funds will start hopefully flowing into communities. We selected recipients that had a pipeline of projects ready to go. And so, and they have a deep history of doing this type of financing work.
Prepared to.
Excited to see where this is going to lead us by this summer. So all of these programs will help contribute to our ultimate objectives. We have three. One, reducing greenhouse gas and other pollutant emissions. Two, providing tangible benefits to families and communities across the country, especially low-income and disadvantaged communities, through energy bill savings, workforce development, and pollution reduction. And the third objective is really leveraging private funding and mobilizing capital. The announcement we made last week promised 7 times leverage of the $20 billion in funding that EPA is giving. In terms of connections to smart growth principles, we have 3 prior projects, and I think all of those will support the smart growth principles. Distributed power generation and storage, including solar, community solar, microgrids, and other clean energy projects. The second is the retrofit of existing buildings and housing to be much more efficient and resilient. Also, new construction of net zero buildings and homes, infill and redevelopment projects. And I should say that about half of the $20 billion that we announced last week are expected to go into the building sector. And then zero emissions transportation, including electric vehicles and charging, micromobility, and other clean technology projects. So I will stop there.
Thank you. Thank you all. I was thinking, since this is a great crash course for me as my first week in this role too. So thank you so much. I know that I think we have until 3:25 to take questions. So we have a couple here, but I also want to make sure that we have enough time for folks in the room and on the line. So I'll kind of combine the remaining questions from the OCR side at least, which is, thinking about the folks that are in this room, and I don't know how much or how familiar you are with these organizations and the network, but it's kind of a mix of folks that sometimes provide technical assistance or might be in the academic space, but doing some kind of, some implementation work on the ground, national organizations. So how can these folks, with all of their own networks, of course, so how can they help communities? I guess 2 things you can answer, one or both. How can they help communities that they work with access these kinds of resources? And how can they help communities, be it through community-based organizations, local governments, transit agencies, orient that work towards smart growth goals?
Sure, I could start. So for the 2 programs that we've announced, we posted on our website, the EPA website, for the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, that application narratives of our selectees. And so, folks can feel free to go through and read them. They're quite dense, but I would say folks in this network could really help pull out the types of projects that each selectee is looking to do. And EPA will be doing this as well over time, but if you really want to get a jump on it, the different selectees have slightly different focus areas. And so, starting to think about which of our recipients, communities that you're working with could access for the projects that they're trying to do. And then some of our selectees already have intake forms for financing on their websites. And so if they have those are linked from EPA's website as well.
Great. Anybody else?
I'll just add that at DOT, we have the DOT Navigator, which is like a one-stop shop of all the funding programs available across DOT. So I think one way that some of the organizations, community partners here could advance some of the things that they're doing in their community is, one, just to be aware of what's out there that you have access to. So the DOT Navigator provides a tool where you can see the funding resources that potentially are available to you. Two, I think that you can connect with the state DOTs or the metropolitan planning organizations, the local transit authorities, or other federal agencies to see what projects are being thought about in your community or in the communities. And just being at the table, just being involved in those discussions. And I think that's really critical is being involved in those discussions. So finding out what's going on in your community, what's the 20-year plan for your community, and then finding out those channels on how you can be involved so that your voice is heard. Those are two suggestions.
So I always like following Victor because I feel like we've obviously been working together for too long. So a couple of things. So again, resources. HUD also has pulled together something called Build for the Future, which is a source that looks at different programs that connect with housing, but most of them are programs from other agencies, energy, EPA, others. Thriving Communities technical assistance is available. We have a listserv where we also share other things that are coming out. We can share that link with others afterwards. But I really want to hear from you all as part of the rest of our conversation on really how we should be working with communities on these. So if you're asking what's the one thing you could do to help communities succeed in their smart growth principles, it's what you already do all day, right? It's be in the community to get them to buy in, right? We're working with places that we're like, we're getting transit, we have the best zoning, we can't get anything approved because the community, the elected officials, no one's buying into it. And so the work that you do every day on the ground, preparing these communities so that they are all have that shared vision and are willing to do it when the funds are available, like that's how you get a strong grant application, right? They're thriving communities, it requires a community partnership, right? Yours are all focused on places that are going to work in communities. And so the work that you're doing there is the best thing you can do to prepare them for the funds. And then just being part of this network where you're seeing what's coming out so you can help direct, say, hey, local government, this sounds exactly like something TCTA would be able to be helpful with, whether it's the light touch, the medium touch, or the deep touch, like reach out there because you'll be able to be that piece that we're working so hard in Thriving Communities Network to see how to build that, how to make sure that across our regional staff, the different federal agencies know each other's resources, that the TA providers know each other's resources. So you actually already serve that.
And Pam brought up a good point in terms of, we can sit here and tell you about the programs that we operate and that we run and the resources that we have that you have access to. But as Pam indicated, what do you need from us? So for example, our
Public policy degree from Georgetown.
a lot of people have told us, DOT, your notice of funding opportunities is too complicated, it's too long. We have had notice of funding opportunities that were 90 pages long. Who is going to read through 90 pages? You know, you're going to have to hire a consultant to do that. So we're working on streamlining our notice of funding opportunity, those opportunities where you can apply for funding. Other things we've heard is that some of our policies aren't really as clear as maybe they should be. So we need to hear from you in terms of how can we better help you? How can we better assist you, whether it's through our programs, whether it's how our programs are written, the language. So yeah, I'm interested in having discussion as well in terms of what are your needs and what can we do to better help you?
I think we could invite anybody to respond for that in the time that we have. If we want to kind of have it more of a discussion, please feel free. Or to ask, yeah, go ahead.
I've got something which seems to be maybe a missing link in the current portfolio. So I'm kind of curious as to how you guys are thinking about workforce. So if I'm a current grantee, I'm one of
For everybody here,
Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, I've got all this money. Do I have the flexibility under my current grant to say, oh, there is part of this project, a workforce apprenticeship on energy efficiency that I would like to fund? I mean, is there enough flexibility in the existing grants that you've already given to incorporate a workforce element if I'm a grantee? Or do the federal agencies need to go back and, as it was done, like in a lot of other federal programs, I'm thinking of like the hardest hit funds, they constantly provided, Treasury provided new guidance. Is that something, or getting to your question,
Have, before I do that,
I think in the last one that was dealing with technical assistance providers, there was of the 50,
I wanted to acknowledge, we don't have anybody.
there was a line about workforce development, but could all of you get together and say, okay, the next RFP that we're going to do across these agencies, you know, in the fall, let's have a workforce thing, because as we're hearing from communities, that's going to be the bottleneck. They're, like you say, they're inundated with all of the research or all of the resources, but now we got to get workers in order to
It's,
do these projects on the ground.
it's interesting you raised that because in the last week, you were the third person in 4 days to raise this with me. And one of them, so,
The stars are aligned.
you know, so the next person I got an email from was someone from labor who says, can we talk about workforce development and thriving communities? So yes, we are certainly thinking about that. And we got a call from Joplin, Missouri saying, we'd love to work on housing, but we have a problem. Our housing's here, our jobs are here. We built this transit system and all our CDLs, our commercial driver's license folks, they've all left. They can make more money elsewhere. So we've had to shut down all 3 of our lines. And now we don't have, how can we get drivers? And I'm like, workforce development? So this is clearly something we need to be tackling. Are you all tackling that in your program?
It was absolutely something that was part of the applications that our selectees and our applicants under Solar for All had to consider. They were judged on how they were integrating workforce development into their programs. There's absolutely flexibility in the funding for them to be able to do that. And part of our goal is that the low-income and disadvantaged communities that are receiving these clean technology projects will also benefit from the good jobs that will be created through the deployment of those technologies. So more to come on exactly how that will be done. But
Is ETA part of the network?
Yes.
And I'll just add with the Thriving Communities program, our program is a little bit different in that we're paying our funding capacity builders to provide technical assistance. Now, part of that technical assistance can be developing strategies plan on workforce development. And that happens a lot through our program. There are a lot of smaller communities that do not have the staffing capacity or expertise to apply for grants. And there are many communities that are trying to look at ways to advance or expand workforce development. And that's part of what our capacity builders are working with the communities on.
To piggyback off of that with the workforce issue, right? One of the things that we're seeing is not only a need for the folks that are gonna carry out the work, but even the people who are gonna teach them. So, like for example, I'm from American Institute of Architects, and our state, our Louisiana state chapter was part of a successful bid for a DOE grant for energy efficient building codes. The piece that they're responsible for is training building officials in understanding current codes, understanding enforcement. They can't find anybody to even train them. So now they have this opportunity and they have this money that they can use for training people, but they can't, it's not even that they can't find building code officials, they can't find trainers to train new building code officials. And so there's like multiple layers, I think, of the workforce issue that need to be taken into consideration, not just the people that are going to do the work, but even the people that are teaching those folks how to do it. There's a gap, I think, that it's a challenge.
please.
To fill all of that, I'm glad that we're talking about both sides of the workforce, because I think with the bipartisan infrastructure law, Inflation Reduction Act, we're seeing there's not enough people who understand these principles and concepts to carry them out in agencies and consultants. So I think ways that we can get the principles out to folks and translate that into like real work. What does that mean that's different than what we've been doing? Because I think a lot of these are broad sweeping principles, but it's like, how does this look different on the ground? Realizing that we don't have a lot of completed projects under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law or Inflation Reduction Act yet. I think it's the third prong. One dream I have would be to integrate and coordinate efforts. And I don't know, in my role with the state of Maryland, I don't know if it's through comprehensive plans that we encourage to fund projects that are coming out of comprehensive plans or other proactive planning mechanisms, that we're creating those threads through the example you used of like housing, jobs, transit. How are we making that whole corridor thriving? And also, how are we not putting funding into like one part of town versus all over a community? I would love to see where maybe a community were to pitch a set of projects, and then the federal government, state governments helped identify the funding that would help carry out that vision. Right now, the grant funding process is the other way around, which many of us know, where it's, oh, you're going to apply for this project to this grant fund, and if you don't get it, maybe you'll apply to another grant fund. And I think that's what's so promising, having most recently come from transportation. That's what's so promising, I think, about some of the work that the Build America Bureau is doing at DOT, is it's like, okay, tell us what you want to do, and then we can figure out grants and financing to do the right type of project, right? Because this is about funding the projects that are going to get us there to all the sustainable growth principles.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a comment in the chat from
Thanks.
Georgia.
Great.
Georgia, I don't know if you want to come off mute or I can read it.
Oh,
Hi.
Hi, can folks see me? Nice to see everybody. Yeah, I was just putting some thoughts in the chat as I was listening to the conversation. I think maybe to go back a few points, one of the big things that we observe here at the National League of Cities is that a lot of cities, especially small cities, will not even consider applying for federal grant opportunities because they know that they
especially if there are any.
process that's required once you become a grantee. So in addition to looking at the NOFO process and the NOFO length, really also we would suggest looking at the other end of the process, right? And what you are asking grantees to comply with, and also support that's available for them to do that. Maybe some of the grant that goes to a city could include a specific pot of money for a salaried grant management specialist, right? Building in those kinds of supports within your programs, I think would really go a long way. Also, the majority of our membership at the National League of Cities is cities under 50,000 people. That's the majority of cities across the country, and that's also a size of city that is not applying for many of these federal opportunities, despite the technical assistance that we and many other folks here are offering. So just wanted to raise those points up. Another thing that I was typing, and then I'll stop sharing, is that I think, especially within local systems, but we see this at all levels of government, there's not many incentives in place to encourage folks across departments and across sectors to actually partner and work together, especially when it comes to funding opportunities. My specific work right now is looking at the arts and health sector and how social determinants of health and public health can benefit from partnering with artists. So my brain is really in the cross-sector space at the moment. And I'm really excited that EPA is having some artists in residence as part of their projects. That's really,
What do you see?
but I think going back to grants and funding opportunities, especially at the local level, the more that you
See the connections of those programs.
to those opportunities, you know, the Thriving Communities program is a really good example, right? Of you have to have a community partner in order to pursue one of those grants. The more that you can encourage local governments to have more than one department involved in the application or more than one entity pooling resources, pooling human resources together for something, the more successful that whole endeavor is going to be. And kind of bringing it back to smart growth. Smart growth by nature is really a cross-sector interdisciplinary idea and set of principles. And you're not actually going to get projects that align with that if you don't incentivize projects to align with those things. Thanks for letting me share.
Georgia, it's great what you said about the small cities. I just want to mention one of our programs is Distressed Cities Technical Assistance. It's not a great name because no one wants to do it because they're like, I'm not a distressed city. So we are thinking about other names that keep the logo. But it is focused, it was started 2018, 2019 money. Congress has consistently asked us to maintain that program, and it is focused, they change the rules all the time, but it is really small cities, under 50,000. And it is focused on financial health, right? Just the financial reporting we have in place doesn't work for these small jurisdictions, really small jurisdictions, right? Some of our programs, one year was under 25,000, areas of persistent poverty. Like I said, the rules are changing, but it is thinking about how do we make this work? It is saying, how can you learn to put your books in order and manage things so when you do get funding, you can use it so that you can meet your residents' needs and do all of that. So it's trying to do some of that kind of base level work that I know you're doing at NLC as well. And they've reached about 50 cities at this point and are still taking more.
Yeah, and I'll just mention, you mentioned it in terms of with this Thriving Communities program, communities have to partner with someone in order to be eligible to apply. The other point I wanted to make, and Pam alluded to this earlier, is that we have established cohorts or communities of practice based on geography. So we have a Main Street cohort, which is focused on those small and rural areas under 50,000. And then we have a complete neighborhoods cohort, which are those areas that are over 50,000, the larger suburban and urban areas. And then we have what's called a network communities cohort. And that cohort is focused on those communities that are near or adjacent major infrastructure projects like freight facilities or highways or ports, airports. And so when applicants are applying, at least with our program, they can choose, oh, we're under 50,000, so we're going to apply through the Main Street cohort. And then when we're selecting capacity builders, we also ask the capacity builders to apply based on their strengths in terms of if they're going to apply for the Main Street, complete neighborhoods, or network communities, and then we'll pair them up. But I liked her thought in terms of partnering. Don't do it alone. And then also, I would say that if you fail, try again. And also, always take advantage of the debrief process, because that's where you can really gain some insight on what were the strengths of your application and what were the weaknesses. So that's a valuable aspect to take advantage of. If you apply for a grant, you're not successful, always take advantage of the debrief process.
Good advice. Thank you. Okay, are we okay on time? Because I know.
3:33, so maybe two more. That work?
Yeah, so does Pauline want to come up the mute to say what you want to say?
Here I am. Sorry about that. Yeah. Thanks, Yvonne. I was hoping you would read my questions for me, but I guess I can do it. I just had two, and and please just, I know time is a little short, but the first one was just regarding kind of workforce and just a question about in subsidized housing and whether or not some of the existing kind of workforce programs that are part of them, and I just think about section 4, kind of off the top of my head, whether or not they've been, I guess, for lack of a better term, leveling up to kind of engage residents and, their workforce programs to do some of this energy efficiency, solar or EV, any of this work. So that's part one of my question. And then the second part is, I haven't heard a lot about, folks in the like sweat equity or the self-help space, and whether or not, like, for instance, like Habitat, whether or not they are also kind of keeping up with some of this move toward resiliency and changing their practices. So
Community.
those questions make sense, but it's to whomever. Thank you.
So the section 3 questions to me, I don't know the answer. I know that we have an active team at HUD that has been focused on making sure that this is meeting current needs. I think Brooke was on. I don't know if she wants to jump in, but I can get more information on that and follow up with you.
Thank you.
As far as kind of the different grantees out there, like the habitats and whatever, I know that there is from what I have heard, looking at their materials, they are very much engaged in how to take advantage of these vast resources in bringing all of these environmental money to improve solar, electric, all of that. And so they are very interested in very much staying up to date on that. I don't know if the National League of Cities person knows more on that, because I don't know if they work together, but Habitat is very much invested in sure that they can benefit from these resources. But I will get you an answer about section 3 and follow up with you.
Great, thank you. Did we have time for one more? No, we're out of time. Okay. Well, thank you so much to our panelists, our guests here, Victor, Julie, Pam, thank you. I think there's a lot of fodder here for future meetings for you all to talk about in terms of the network with workforce and what does that really mean? And are you really doing it enough? And, tying the aspects of community-driven work to comp plans and other places where communities have kind of already left their vision on paper for people to kind of respond to. So thank you all for the great discussion. Really appreciate you being here. Thank you all for instructions on breakout groups. So.
Yeah, so we're gonna do a little activity before we do the breakout groups. And so we're gonna have the opportunity for both like a little bit of work on your own, and also a little bit of chance if you wanted to go and talk to any of the speakers, or to I'm realizing my back to the virtual people. To talk to the speakers if you wanted to do that. So we really appreciate everyone coming, like both the virtual people who are here, probably can't see at all. It's one thing about this room is that it's hard for the virtual people to see everyone. So like, hi, virtual people. So as we were talking, as the EPA team was talking with the steering committee and with different members in the Smart Growth Network, we started to really hear this common theme about collaboration. And what we started to understand is that SGN members would like to work together to accomplish things, to benefit from your shared experience, maximize impact by collaborating and working together. And we also understood that we don't all know like the extent of this network. Like there's just, people come into the room, maybe you've been to many of these, maybe this is your first one, we like see each other, we maybe get a chance to talk to somebody at happy hour, but we don't really all know, and so we started to understand that it would be helpful to know if like another SGN member is working on a topic that you're interested in, or working in a place where you are also working, or kind of like across the river from the town where you're working. So for that reason, we created this map so that we can all see more clearly how the work of the SGN is happening. And so this map, and thank you so much to the people who started populating it by adding 67 projects to it. We really, really appreciate people who have participated so far. And as you can see, it has 5 topical groupings, which are by color, land use, equity. So, and we realized there are way more than 5 topics that we're all working on. So we did our best to group them. I know this isn't perfect, but bear with us. So the first grouping is land use, equitable development, and zoning. Second grouping is climate resilience. The third grouping is community development. The fourth grouping, public health, environmental justice, and food systems. And then the last grouping, which is just a little bit there, is transportation and infrastructure systems. So we wanted to give everybody the chance to like actually put your work like on the map, so to speak.
I'm going to try to do all that in less than 5 minutes.
A chance to do that yet. So if you look on your agenda, you have the opportunity to do that now. So here in this little, right here on your agenda, and there are extra copies if anyone doesn't have one, is a little QR code. There are actually several QR codes on this agenda, but the one that's next to the collaboration is the one you want to go to. And if you use this QR code with your phone, you will get to a short survey where you can fill out, and basically you'll be able to put a dot on the map saying where you are. You'll be able to choose one of these categories, and you can also tell a little bit more about the work that you're doing. You can pick a type of work like policy versus technical assistance. There are a number of groupings for that. And you can also pick, you can also tell us a little bit more about the work, and you can enter your contact information so that you can actually, be in touch to collaborate. So we would love it if you would spend a few minutes doing that now. And what you'll do, so after and if you do it, that you'll get the immediate instant gratification of seeing your dot appear right here on the screen. So,
You can start throwing nut bars.
we don't have, right, that's true. So, and what I want to say is, like, if you have regional work in many places, you can fill it out as many times as you like. If you only work in one place, that's fine. Please put that dot on the map. And if you work nationally, that's also fine. Just put your dot wherever you work and pick your color. And like include your information. We just want to get as much of a picture as we possibly can. I know some people said, I don't work in regional places, but you work somewhere. So wherever you work is where we want you to know where you are. And we would really love to have that. And after you fill out, we're going to take a little break so that everyone can do that. Or if you've already filled out your dots on the map, or when you have, so kind of go around, talk to the speakers, eat some snacks. We're going to just take a few minutes to do that. And then we're going to break into breakout groups, one breakout group by geography, and then one breakout group by topic, so we can actually see if there's things bubbling up to collaborate on. So, and people are standing by to direct you to the rooms where you're going to go. So we're going to help you with that process. But for right now, we're just going to be quiet for a minute, let everybody do this exercise, and then I'll give you a little more instructions in a few minutes.
Agenda or Wi-Fi access?